The chief says, "See how cruel these white people look. Their lips are thin, their noses sharp, their faces furrowed and distorted by folds. Their eyes have a staring expression. They're always seeking something. What are they seeking? The whites always seem to want something. They're always uneasy and restless. We do not know what they want. We do not understand them. We think they're all insane." So Young asked, "Well, why do you think? Why do you think these people are insane?" And Mountain Lake says, "They say they think with their heads." And Young said, "Well, how should they think?" And Mountain Lake puts his hand to his torso like this. And then Young asked, "Well, how do you think?" And he did the same thing. And Young said he was sitting there thinking, okay, should I follow my head? Should I follow my heart? Sort of thing. And of course, following your heart, going with your feelings and emotion. But as he was looking into Mountain Lake's eyes, he had an epiphany, and he realized he's not talking about the heart. He's talking about wisdom, that gut feeling that we have. Earlier in this series, I talked about intuition. And how in our Western society we're taught, that we should go with our thinking and feeling to examine things, where no, it's our intuition that needs to lead. And then the thinking and feeling nature can follow that lead of the intuition. Back on September 22nd, we started this series on the creative process, understanding how our minds really work. And I asked you to start thinking about, what do you want to release in your life? What do you want to create in your life? And then, of course, the very practical question of how do you do that? And we're looking at the great spiritual truths of all ages. It seems every spiritual belief system has this guide on, okay, well, if we're spiritual beings having a human experience, then how do we affect a human experience that's pleasant? And unity, comes out of course, founded back in 1889. At that time, of course, especially in Kansas City where we were started, Christianity was the thing that most people were familiar with. So we do have an approach to Christianity that's different. We have an approach to the Bible that's different. We don't take it literally. We recognize that the narrative stories, though, have symbolism in this. And we know this because the esoteric traditions kept this hidden, especially after the Spanish Inquisition and all of those kinds of things, where they were trying to eradicate anything that didn't adhere to what mainstream Christianity, believed. The creative process, though, is laid out in symbolism in that first chapter of Genesis, those first 7 days of creation. And what I want you to realize, though, is all of the characters in the Bible and this whole process, these 7 days, happens within each of us. So Duncan, if you'll put up a slide, let's just do a quick review. This is how our minds actually create. We start out with illumination. We recognize that our minds our minds are always connected to the divine mind, but we just need to open that door, open that gate, and allow that divine idea to reach our own conscious mind. And then we have faith. We recognize that when we place our faith in God and recognize that the divine ideas that are right and perfect for us will be recognized by us, we can move forward with them. And so our imagination starts to work with the idea that we get. And as our imagination starts working with it, we start to get an understanding of the plan. And then our willpower reflects that understanding, and it is almost an unconscious oomph, an impulse to start taking some action. Then the fifth day, we let our intuition lead on where to go with this, and that's what I just touched on before. In the Western society, it's like, oh, no, don't trust the gut feeling. Go with your thoughts, go with your feelings to discern what it is you need to do. It's like, no, those should be in service to intuition, or as Joseph Campbell called it, the humanity, that's in the rest of the body. Our mind is much more than just the gray matter between our ears. Then the sixth day, we take our wisdom and our love, and we just start to really let go of the things that we want to release in our lives. And so let's go ahead and move on to the seventh day there, Duncan. Now, one of the interesting things about the Bible is that this story, they Bible scholars realize was added to the beginning of Genesis, so it actually slops over into the first couple of verses of the second chapter of Genesis. So thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all of his work. And God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all of the work of creating that he had done. I don't know about you, but as I read through that first chapter of Genesis, it looks like he didn't even break a sweat. So what's the deal with all of his work? In spiritual traditions, and that's the one oddity about the Jewish and the Christian tradition, is that in all these other spiritual traditions, we do what the gods do. but in the Judeo-Christian system, it's like, oh no, God's separate from us. So if we see in Scripture, whether it's Jewish, Christian, or otherwise, if the gods are doing it, that's, like I said, something that's happening within us. So when God rested, it means that it's time in this creative process for us to rest. And by resting, it's just a matter of like, okay, now it's time to just let go of the process. In any creative process, we get to the point after those first 6 steps of recognizing, okay, I've followed my guidance, I've done everything that I can do, I don't see the creation yet, or I don't see the release of what I want to release yet, but this is where we let go. It's like, okay, I'm going to trust that the rest is unfolding. And God said it was good, as I said last week. Perhaps what they're saying there is God sees to it that we're having a good outcome to the process. Now, the reason I stretch this out over 8 weeks is that there's a different understanding now of let go and let God. If you had not gone through the complexity of examining what was happening within you over these 8 weeks, you would not probably have appreciated or grasped how this works. So we confront that kind of dark side within us, some of the resistance that pops up anytime we're taking a venture like that, usually anything that's in our consciousness, in our subconscious mind that surfaces that is in opposition to what it is that we think we want. And it's our opportunity to look at those old assumptions, those old beliefs from earlier in our life. It's like, yeah, boy, I don't know what I was thinking back then, but yeah, I'd like to let go of that and have a more pleasant life. And there's a spiritual concept in all of the spiritual traditions of a gateway to God. And there's this basic question that a lot of theologians took over. What happens between the stimulus and the response? So something happens to you in the physical world, and then you respond to it. But in the between there, it's an inner work that happens. Our thoughts, our feelings arise, our intuition arise. And I want to give you the contrast between 2 authors. T.S. Eliot said that between the stimulus and the response lies the shadow. And he went on to talk about how our negative thoughts tend to creep in there, and we need to protect from that. Yet Viktor Frankl, who was a neurologist, of course he was a Holocaust survivor, so he was in one of those concentration camps during World War II. He disagreed. He said between the stimulus and the response lies freedom. And he said he was sitting in the concentration camp one day, and he was looking around, and he says, looking at the guards, and he realized, wow, because when you really think about it, these are the guys who are in bondage. Between the stimulus and the response is a gateway to God, and that is, what are we thinking? What are we feeling? How are we reacting as we have that response? And the gateway of consciousness is gateways to develop a consciousness of now, to just be willing to, as often as we can, just be in the moment. We've all had the experience of either having a crisis or having bliss in our life where we have a time stretch or a time compression. Maybe deep in meditation, you're like, oh, wow, and you just feel transcendent, and then suddenly you wake up or you open your eyes, and it's an hour later. It's like, where did the time go? On the other hand, there'll be a time when we're in a crisis where this sublime thing happens where suddenly the 3 seconds seems to feel like 3 minutes. I know when Carla and I first moved down to Hollywood, Florida, after we got to the seminary in 2003, I finally, our old car was just kind of falling apart, so I went and bought a new car. And I had it for about 10 days, and I got caught up in this road rage incident. Well, I really wasn't feeling the rage as much as just this guy. For some reason, I'd done something that seemed to offend him, and he cut me off trying to force me into the guardrail in the median strip. So I took evasive action, and then suddenly the car is spinning around and around and around, and I end up hitting the the guardrail basically on the other side of the road. And I realized how suddenly it was kind of like, okay. I remember kind of looking around the car, and it was just a surreal feeling, but it just seemed to take so long that, the car hit the other side. Turns out totaled the car, but I popped out of there, and this kind of suddenly came back to a sense of the reality of time. And these two these two wonderful elderly women who were following the whole thing, stopped and just made sure I was okay, and made sure, I got first responders and stuff. But it was kind of wow. So have you had that time stretch or that time compression that happens? You start to see that our reality of the physical world can be manipulated. It can be perceived in a different way. And that's just it. How are we perceiving what is happening? How are we reacting to what's happening? So, instead of trying to make things right, can we see things rightly? Can we recognize our good when it's standing right in front of us? Ask yourselves the question, are we human beings or are we human doings? So often we feel like we need to be doing something, when sometimes we just need to be. When I've followed all of the guidance that's come to me, and I've taken the actions that I know need to take, sometimes the best thing that I can do from that point, at that point, is to just do nothing. Wait for further guidance. And God rested. So what does that mean? Well, it means, like I said, we just need to let go. Let go of the project. Okay, I've done all that I can do. I'm just going to trust that the rest is going to unfold in nature's time. We allow the universe to follow through on our creative process. And the couple of times I've done this, I've had people go through like these 8 weeks. Like I said, we have the 7 days of creation, but the first week was just kind of a setup and explaining you what was coming in the following 7 weeks. Is allow that evolution to happen where you start suddenly in the next week or two, especially like right before Thanksgiving, you're like, wow, here I was beginning to doubt that it was going to come, and it came. And it's better than I ever would have imagined it would be. So open your mind, open your heart to having that kind of a demonstration here in these next few days. There's a story of a Zen master who had a new student arrive, and he wanted to learn from the Zen Buddhist master. And he was, of course, trying to impress the Zen Buddhist master with everything that he knew. And they were sitting and having some tea, and the guy just wouldn't, the Zen master takes the teapot and starts pouring tea into his cup, and the cup starts to overflow, and the water, and the tea's going everywhere. And the guy, and the student's like, whoa, what's going on here? And the Zen master said, I hear you telling me all that you know. Perhaps your mind is like this cup here. If it's full, nothing else new can go into it. Are you willing to empty your cup and consider some new ideas, some new perceptions? So, in addition to just letting go of the process, it's a good thing to just look at what else we need to let go of, to kind of mop up after these 7 days of creation. What's standing in the way of our good? What are those basic assumptions that we've got about life, or beliefs of how life should be? What do we believe is our destiny, or what do we believe we have a right to? Last week I asked you, okay, if your intuition is leading, and allow your thoughts and feelings to act on that intuitive feeling, Monitor your thoughts and feelings during this last week and just make sure you're sending out the good ones. The negative ones, it's time to rein them in. I've got a quote here from Christina Feldman. She's a teacher of insight meditation. We believe that it's difficult to let go, but in truth, it's much more difficult and painful to hold and protect. Reflect upon anything in your life that you grasp a hold of. Opinions, historical resentments, ambitions, unfulfilled fantasies. Sense the tightness, the fear, and the defensiveness that surrounds how you feel about that grasping. It's a painful, anxious experience of unhappiness. We do not let go in order to make ourselves impoverished or bereft. We let go in order to discover happiness and peace. So let's look again at those 5 areas of our life. What about your health? As I explained, the founder of our movement back in the 1880s was Myrtle Fillmore. She'd been told her whole life that tuberculosis ran in her family, and she came down with tuberculosis. And it wasn't until she heard a speaker on this, the New Thought movement just talk about, mind over matter. You can meditate, you can heal anything. What about your occupation? Are you doing something you enjoy doing? Do you feel like you are limited in some way as to what you can do to make a living? What about your relationships? Of course, there's the intimate relationships. What are your assumptions there? What are your thoughts? What are your fears? What about friendships? What about your coworkers? What about family? And what about your money supply? Do you have enough to cover, all of the bills, and with enough to spare and to share? What do you deserve? And then what about spiritual growth? Your connection with that thing that we call God, this spiritual realm that we know is there somehow, some way. And it's called by many names. One person mentioned the need to release the need for fame. And of course it's notorious that, usually, in our teens and 20s, we're looking for fame and recognition. Yet in the Gospel of Luke, it says, "He who humbles himself shall be exalted." The author, Alan Cohen, he also talked about needing to release what we think are our possessions. He's in one of his books, he talked about how he went to this musical that he really wanted to go to with one of his friends. And so they had the 2 tickets, and they're sitting there, and just before the show begins, and 2 other people come up and say, "You're in our seats." And they're like, "Well, I don't think so." And they pulled out their tickets, and the 2 people pulled out their tickets, and sure enough, same date, same theater, same seats, and Alan and the other people were being pretty vehement. It was like, "The show's about to start, get out of our seats," kind of a thing. And Alan's like, "Okay, well, and said to their friend, don't worry about it, we'll go to the box office and figure this out." And went to the box office, and they said, "Oh, yeah, we've had a computer glitch where we've had some duplicate tickets, but don't worry about it. We've got, we've got seats available." And sure enough, they printed out some, tickets and handed it to them, and they looked at the tickets and it turns out they got an upgrade. They were in much better seats, much more expensive seats, and were able to join, enjoy that musical that they were looking forward to. So sometimes just letting go of something that we feel, is important. Of course, there's the old saying, if you love something, set it free. If it comes back to you, it's yours. If it doesn't come back to you, hunt it down and kill it. No, I'm kidding. That's not what it said. If it doesn't come back to you, it never was yours in the first place. And then what are the fears? I heard an interesting contrast from Dr. Rachel Naomi Raymond talking about 2 patients. One was that this man had cancer, and for some reason he wouldn't take his medication. And so she had to do a little bit of therapy with him, and what he found was he felt like for some reason taking the medication was giving in to the cancer. And so they talked about that and some of his beliefs and assumptions. Then she said, and oddly, there was this other patient who had had cancer 10 years before and had been cancer-free. And her fear was that she was going to get cancer again. And so she said she lived her life as if she was only going to live for another week. So she said she wouldn't spend money on good clothing, shoes, vacations. She'd plan them, but she wouldn't basically nail down the plans or shop or pack for them until just a few days before. She wasn't having dental work done, all of these things. And in her realization, it was like, okay, she has this fear that she's going to die, and so she, in meditation, went into this black hole of death that she feared so much, and she was tumbling, and then suddenly she realized she was just floating. And she thought, that's it? I'm just floating in the ethers? And she did a cartwheel to the right and a cartwheel to the left and started to dance. And then she started to act like she was on a trampoline. She just started to bounce and bounce and bounce and breaks through this, I guess you'd call it a glass ceiling, and just sees these drops of love and stuff going out. And she started realizing I was fearing nothing. And of course, in the Bible, in the last book of Revelations, there's this idea of being thrown into the bottomless pit. Well, I've got news for you. A bottomless pit has nothing in it. And a lot of times we're just fearing nothing. So she said after that realization, she did the only thing that she could do. She went straight to the shoe store and bought these Italian shoes that she had been coveting forever. But she wouldn't want to buy them because what's the point? What's our view of the world? Now, there's a saying that's kind of entered the mainstream of our society, but it's all good. It's all good. No, it's not all good. We have the opportunity to create things, and sometimes we create things that are rather unpleasant. So what I'd like to hear people say, instead of saying it's all good, I'd like to hear them say, it's all good when I remember I'm in God. Let go of the thinking that God is separate from us. And that's another thing about this let go, let God, is there's kind of that implication that we're separate from God. And I know this one unity minister came up with an alternative, and he said, rein in false personality, unleash divine potential. Recognize that we are working within this realm of the creative spirit of the universe. So, the question, though, is, do we trust the universe? Do we allow the divine mind to guide us in what it is we need to do? And sometimes we just need to let go of the plans we have made. I mentioned Joseph Campbell earlier. One of his quotes that I love is, we must be willing to let go of the life we have planned so as to accept the life that is waiting for us. Duncan, go ahead and put up the slide of this week's takeaways. Number one, let go and let God. Let go of our fears, of assumptions, or beliefs regarding our health, our occupation, relationships, money supply, spiritual growth. Develop a consciousness of now. Be willing to be in the moment as often as you can. I don't know about you, but I have not been able to experience being in the now moment all the time. We do need to make some plans. But the problem is, if our thoughts are running away in the moment, are we aware of where those thoughts are leading us and why we're reacting that way? And instead of making things right, can we see things rightly? Then we got the affirmative prayer. I trust the universe. I let go and let God. I rein in false personality. I unleash divine potential. And I know you've got the handout there in your bulletins. Recognize how far each of us have come over these 8 weeks, and don't let it stop here. Allow your creativity, to continue to flourish, to express by manifesting the things that you do need in your life and the things that you desire. Our closing story is a 3-minute video from Steve Hartman of the CBS Evening News.
Hey! Good. Not many high school basketball managers get a party on their behalf, especially not 10 years after graduation.
it seems like just yesterday it was a magical night back in 2006. Coach pointed his finger at me and I stepped onto the court for the first time in my varsity career.
Jason McElwain is autistic. 10 years ago, it was his job to fetch water and mop up other people's sweat at Greece Athena High School in Rochester, New York. But for the last regular season game of his senior year, the coach let Jason, better known as J-Mac, suit up and play the final 4 minutes. That's him going in, number 52. Everyone in the crowd was hoping for a layup, at most. But J-Mac had other ideas. He stepped outside the three-point line and drained it. And he was just getting started.
He caught fire. It just caught fire. I was hot as a pistol.
J-Mac ended up shooting 6 three-pointers. One right after the other. He had 20 points total. And each time a shot went in, his teammates and the crowd went a little crazy. His last basket, right at the buzzer, created total mayhem. After we first told this story, big things started happening for J-Mac. I mean big things.
A country was captivated by an amazing story on the basketball court.
President George Bush requested an audience with him. J-Mac co-authored a book about himself.
Thanks, J-Mac.
And perhaps the biggest change of all.
It gave me confidence that I can do anything. Let's go!
After graduation, J-Mac became assistant coach at his old high school. His passion for the game hasn't faded a bit. His connection to the students, as strong as ever. The only difference is that now, above it all, number 52 hangs near the rafters. His retired jersey, a reminder to us all that there's greatness waiting in every kid. We just need to call their numbers. Steve Hartman, on the road, in Rochester, New York.
From the Bible, the second book of Chronicles, 30th chapter, 9th verse. For the Lord your God is gracious and merciful, and will not turn away his face from you if you turn your face to him. May you always be open to God's guidance and grace. Let's prepare for meditation.